his biological parents quietly dropped his daughter off at an orphanage, just so they could catch a flight to Hawaii and vacation with their favorite grandkids from his sister's side. No warning, no goodbye, not even a glance back. What could that little girl possibly have done to deserve this? Stick with us to hear the rest of the story. Nate never thought he'd have to ask his parents to watch Ellie, not because he didn't trust them, but because he knew that cold, quiet distance all too well. That polite, proper kindness that never quite felt warm enough, the way they always kept their own granddaughter at arm's length. He's a structural inspection engineer at an aircraft maintenance hangar in Santa Clara, working odd shifts that change all the time. Since his wife left, Nate hasn't known the meaning of free time. He's the dad, the mom, the glue holding everything together in that little two-bedroom house. Ellie, his 7-year-old daughter with curly auburn hair and eyes always full of questions, is the only reason Nate hasn't fallen apart. His ex-wife, Hannah, made her choice 3 years ago. When a promotion opportunity came up in New York, she left without hesitation. Ellie was only 4. No tears, no custody battle, just a nod and a small suitcase. "I'm not cut out for the whole family life thing," Hannah had said, like she was talking about someone's spice tolerance. Nate didn't beg. He just watched their daughter cling to her mother's leg one last time, then walked her back inside, shut the door, and started a whole new life. Ellie grew into a special kind of kid, smart, deeply perceptive, but sensitive. She wasn't loud or rambunctious. She watched, remembered, and asked the kind of questions adults rarely knew how to answer. But that introspective nature of hers often got misunderstood. To her grandparents, Robert and Donna, Ellie was distant, fragile, always off in her own world. Ever since Nate chose to raise Ellie on his own, his already lukewarm relationship with his parents grew even colder. His dad, a former lawyer, saw the world through a strict lens of performance and principles. His mom, Donna, used to be a grade school teacher, always soft-spoken but emotionally distant. They still checked in, still sent birthday cards, still bought the occasional generic gift, but they never truly tried to understand Ellie. By contrast, Nate's sister, Miranda, was the perfect embodiment of everything their parents ever wanted in a child. She had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, well-behaved, top of their class, into sports and the arts, basically postcard material. Miranda worked in marketing. Her husband was a pediatrician, and they lived in Palo Alto, close to their parents. Almost every weekend, new photos of the grandparents playing with their favorite grandkids would pop up in the family group chat. Nate never said a word, but he saw it all. The times Ellie was only invited over when it was convenient, the birthday gifts that were secondhand books while her cousins got expensive Lego sets, the quick, detached kiss on Ellie's forehead compared to the warm, lingering hugs her cousins got. No one ever said anything outright, but everyone knew. Especially Ellie. That time, Nate had to work 3 straight night shifts. 2 Boeing planes had structural issues at once, and the company pulled in every inspection engineer available. Lisa, Nate's trusted babysitter, was out of town visiting her mom in Seattle. None of his friends were free at such odd hours. He looked at the calendar, looked at Ellie, then at his parents' number. He didn't want to call, but he had to. "Mom, I know it's short notice, but can I drop Ellie off at your place for 3 nights? Just 3 nights. She's got a full routine already, and her meals are all prepped." Nate spoke clearly, slowly. There was a long pause on the other end. 3 nights? His father's voice, flat, measured. "Is there anyone else you can ask?" "No. Lisa's away. I'm on night shifts. Ellie can't stay home alone." Your mother will call you back." About an hour later, his mom called. "Okay, but she'll need to bring absolutely everything she needs. There's nothing for kids here." "I know. I'll pack everything. Thank you," Nate said. That night, he got everything ready. He printed Ellie's daily schedule, meal times, reading time, all of it. He packed her allergy meds, portioned out her favorite snacks into labeled baggies, and tucked them into her sloth-shaped backpack with her stuffed animal Sammy. He even slipped in the comic book she was halfway through. Everything was neatly organized, clearly labeled, handwritten. The next morning, as he dropped Ellie off at her grandparents' house, he walked her through every step. "If anything doesn't feel right, you call me. I'll come right away." Ellie nodded, still hugging Sammy. "I'll be good. I won't bother anyone." That sentence hit Nate hard. It wasn't something a kid says when they're excited to visit their grandparents. It sounded more like an apology in advance. A way of asking for permission to simply exist in a place she knew she wasn't really welcome. As Nate pulled away from the driveway, he glanced back in the mirror. His mom stood at the door, arms crossed. Her face wasn't angry, but it wasn't warm either. Her eyes met his for a second, then looked away. A chill ran through him, though he couldn't explain why. But he didn't have a choice. He had to get to work. And Ellie was staying behind. That shift ran longer than expected. One of the engine turbines being inspected post-maintenance had pressure issues, and the whole team had to start over. Nate was on the lift, data chart in hand, when his phone started buzzing nonstop in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Ellie's school. His gut turned cold in an instant. "Mr. Walker, this is Miss Ellis from the front office at Westwood Elementary. We're calling to ask why Ellie isn't in class today. She's marked absent without notice." "She's not at school?" Nate shot up from the aluminum stool. "She's staying with her grandparents. Didn't they take her in?" "We haven't seen her today, and no one from the family contacted the school either," the voice on the line said. Nate couldn't say anything. His hands were already dialing his dad. No answer. He called his mom. Still nothing. He tried the landline. Just endless ringing. No one picked up. His throat went dry. That uneasy feeling in his chest surged higher by the second. He turned to his supervisor and gave a sharp signal. "Family emergency. I have to go. Now." Less than 15 minutes later, Nate was tearing down the familiar street to his parents' house. The sun was fading. Streetlights smeared long streaks of light across his windshield like tension drawn in glass. He pulled up to the curb. Something deep in his gut told him not to expect normal anymore. No car in the garage, front door shut, no lights, no sound. Nate pounded on the door, calling out loud, "Mom? Dad? Ellie? I'm here." Nothing. Not a single sound. He grabbed the spare key from the stone box by the doorstep, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The house was so quiet, every footstep echoed like a drumbeat in his chest. The kitchen was cold. No smell of food, no hum of a TV. On the dining table, right in the center, lay a single sheet of paper, face down. Plain white, written in dark blue ink, in his mother's neat, familiar handwriting. Nate flipped it over. "Sam, sorry, we couldn't watch Ellie. Arranged temporary care with the orphanage." He didn't move for a few seconds. Didn't understand. His eyes locked on the sentence like maybe, if he stared hard enough, more meaning would appear. But that was it. No phone number, no address, no explanation, no contact person, no instructions for the child's father. Just abandonment. The whole house was empty. No suitcases in the living room, no pots or pans in the kitchen. Everything looked untouched, except the people were gone. The stillness in the air chilled the place to the bone. Nate walked into the guest room, Ellie's temporary room. Her sleeping bag was still laid out neatly on the bed, completely empty. His knees nearly gave out. His hands shook, but there was no time to panic. He pulled out his phone and called 911. His voice cracked as he spoke. "My daughter, my little girl, I think she was abandoned. I'm her legal parent. Her grandparents left a note saying they dropped her off at an orphanage, but I never gave permission. I didn't agree to any of this. I need to know where my daughter is." The dispatcher kept a calm tone, asking him to hold while they connected him to Child Protective Services. Every second dragged like a blade across his nerves. The hold tone beeped steadily, maddeningly, each one cutting deeper than the last. A social worker named Valerie finally picked up. Nate gave her Ellie's full name, birth date, his parents' names, and their address. She asked to check the records. A few minutes later, she confirmed, "There is a match." Ellie Walker was brought to the temporary child care center at 7 p.m. yesterday. The adult who dropped her off claimed to be her guardian and stated they were unable to continue care due to an emergency situation. "Guardian?" Nate nearly shouted into the phone. "I'm her biological father. I'm alive. I'm right here. I was at work. They are not her legal guardians. They don't have that right." "I understand, Mr. Walker. Please stay calm. I'll escalate this to the case coordinator immediately so we can verify custody and help you reunite with Ellie as soon as possible." "Is she okay? Where is she? Who's with her right now?" Nate's voice broke. "I can't disclose the exact location over the phone. Valerie said, "but Ellie is currently in a safe place. She's not injured. We can arrange for you to meet with the caseworker tonight if you're able to come to the nearest regional office." Nate hung up. His heart was pounding. He leaned his forehead against the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and tried not to scream. But Valerie's last words still echoed in his ears. She's in a safe place. Except it wasn't home. It wasn't her dad's arms. It wasn't her bed. And the reason she was there was because someone, his own parents, had decided to erase him from his role as a father. Without a word. Without asking. "I'm alive," Nate muttered. "I'm her legal father. What gave them the right?" The question pounded in his head like a hammer on steel, sharp, relentless, impossible to silence. The shelter was less than a 10-minute drive from the police station. Nate didn't remember exactly how he parked, or whether he said everything he needed to at reception. Everything unfolded in a kind of numb haze. But his body moved with precision, his steps steady, like some part of him already knew what to do to bring Ellie home. The waiting room was quiet, tinged with the smell of plastic and disinfectant. A social worker named Karen led him down the hallway. "We verified your custody," she said softly. "You can see her now. Ellie's in room 3. The door swung open. Ellie was curled up in the corner of the room, arms wrapped around her knees, t-shirt wrinkled, hair a mess. In her hands was the gray sloth, Sammy. Nate had packed in her backpack. Her face lifted at the sound of the door. Her eyes were swollen from crying. But a second later, she bolted toward him. "Daddy!" Nate dropped to his knees, arms wide. The small impact of her body nearly knocked the air from his lungs. She clung to him, face buried in his chest, her sobs breaking through. I thought you weren't coming back." "Never," Nate whispered, one arm wrapped tightly around her back, the other cradling her head. "Not ever, Ellie. I always come back for you." They sat like that for minutes, just breath and broken sobs. Finally, when Ellie looked up, eyes red and swollen, she said something that drained the blood from Nate's veins. "They said, you were tired of me. That you asked them to let someone else take care of me for a while." Nate froze. He stared at her, desperate to respond, to scream that it was a lie, a cruel, heartless lie, but nothing came out. His arms just pulled her tighter, his hands trembling. "No, never. I never said that. I would never leave you. I was working. I thought you were safe with your grandparents." Ellie gave a small nod, like she couldn't quite believe it all, but wanted to. "I kept asking why you didn't call, why you didn't come, but they didn't say anything." Karen gently sat down beside them, her voice soft. "We had no idea Ellie had a living parent. The person who brought her in claimed she had no guardian. They said they were a neighbor, authorized to care for her, but couldn't continue due to health reasons." "They're not neighbors," Nate said, his voice sharp. "They're her grandparents, my parents." Karen frowned. "We weren't given any documentation regarding custody, so the file was marked as no confirmed familial relation. Because of that, the system treated it as an abandonment case." Nate turned to look at Ellie. She was sitting quietly, still clutching Sammy, eyes fixed on the floor. "Has she eaten?" he asked. "We tried a few times," Karen said. "She had a little soup, but most of the time she just held onto the sloth and kept asking the same question." Karen looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did Daddy forget me?" Nate dropped his head, one hand covering his forehead, trying to hold back the surge of emotion breaking loose inside. He couldn't begin to imagine what Ellie had gone through over the past 2 days. Ellie was still speaking, quietly, like saying it any louder might make it hurt more. "I don't understand why they took my cousins to Hawaii and left me here." That sentence felt like a cold blade straight to the gut. Nate looked up, his voice low and steady. "Who told you that?" "Grandma," Ellie said. "She said I'm not like them. She said, kids like me are hard to take care of, that not everyone can handle it." Nate couldn't breathe, his fists clenched so tight, his nails nearly dug into his skin. It wasn't anger anymore, it was pain. A kind of pain that had no name, no clean explanation. Because this wasn't just abandonment, it was rejection. It was turning a child into a burden in the eyes of her own blood. He gently brushed Ellie's hair back, keeping his voice as steady as he could. "You did nothing wrong. This is not your fault. You are not hard to take care of. You're an amazing kid, and I'm proud of you every single day." Ellie didn't answer, but she leaned her head against his shoulder, quiet and still. Karen quietly stepped out of the room, leaving them alone in the soft yellow glow. A long while later, Nate finally spoke. "Do you want to come home with me?" Ellie nodded instantly. Quick and certain. "Then we're going home. No one gets to decide that but you and me." That night, Nate stayed with her the whole time in the observation room, waiting for the temporary release paperwork to go through. He didn't take his eyes off her, not for a single second, and deep down, Nate knew this wasn't just a careless mistake. This was a wound, deep and deliberate. Ellie had felt the full weight of being pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to protect her. When the verification was complete and Ellie was officially released back into his care, they left the shelter close to midnight. She was fast asleep in the back seat, still hugging Sammy tight, lips murmuring something in a dream. Nate didn't ask. He just turned the heat on low and drove slowly, carefully toward home. The small apartment welcomed them in familiar silence. Nate carried Ellie to her bed, tucked her in, and sat beside her for a long time, just watching her sleep. His thoughts didn't stop. The anger wasn't fire, it was stone, heavy, cold, and sinking deeper by the minute. He opened his laptop, logged into social media, searched for Miranda, his sister, the golden one, the always perfect one, the one their parents adored. Her profile was full of photos. It didn't take long. A beach picture, Miranda in a floral maxi dress standing between Robert and Donna. Behind them, her two kids, grinning wide. The sky was flawless blue. Sand stuck to everyone's legs. The caption read, "Precious moments, spontaneous getaway with the best grandparents ever. Ohana, blessed sun and sea." Nate didn't click on the first photo. His eyes slid down to the next. Second photo, his father, Robert, in Hawaiian shorts and a button-down shirt, standing on the shoreline, bending over to guide his grandson on how to ride a wave. One hand rested on the boy's shoulder, like he was passing down the legacy of an entire bloodline. Third photo, Donna on a sun lounger, carefully rubbing sunscreen onto her granddaughter's shoulder. The girl beamed. Her hair was braided, a bright hibiscus flower tucked neatly behind one ear. Fourth photo, the whole family gathered around a beachside restaurant table. Warm golden lights, cocktails in every color, artfully plated food, everyone smiling. On the table, two kid-sized juice glasses, one for each of the beloved grandkids. Ellie wasn't there. Not a mention. Not a trace. Nate stared at the screen. His knuckles went white from how hard his hands clenched. It felt like he was staring into a perfect world, one where his daughter had never been allowed to exist. Nate kept scrolling. More posts flew past until one caught his eye. A check-in. San Jose International Airport. Posted 3 days ago. The same day Ellie was dropped at the shelter. Same window of time. Exact match. This wasn't a spontaneous getaway. This wasn't some last-minute emergency. This was planned. Every detail, flights, hotel, itinerary, mapped out ahead of time. And Ellie? She wasn't part of the plan. She was the part they threw out. A 7-year-old girl, packaged and dropped off at a childcare facility like unwanted luggage. Nate started screenshotting everything. The account name, the timestamps, every photo, every caption, every hashtag, every shred of proof that Ellie had been erased from the family's picture. He grabbed his phone and dialed his lawyer, Greg Thomas, an old friend from law school who now specialized in child advocacy. "Greg, it's me. Nate." Greg's voice was groggy. "What? What's going on? It's the middle of the night." "They dumped her at a shelter and flew to Hawaii with the other grandkids," Nate said, his voice low, tight. "Left a note, no contact info, claimed they were her guardians. I've got screenshots, photos, travel dates, everything. It's clear they planned this just to get her out of the way." There was a pause. Then Greg snapped, fully awake. "Do they have any legal custody at all?" "No, I have full custody. All the paperwork's in order." "Did they tell the shelter her mom was dead or unreachable?" "They said Ellie had no guardian, no one to claim her. It was all a lie." "Jesus." Greg exhaled hard. "This isn't negligence anymore. This is premeditated. Abandoning a minor, falsifying guardian status, possibly fabricating an emergency to conceal personal intent." "I want to press charges," Nate said, slow and clear. "I want this to go through every legal channel. No deals, no apologies." "We've got a case," Greg said. "A strong one. I'll start drafting the complaint and notify the local authorities to open an investigation." "But Nate, are you prepared for how far this could go?" Nate looked toward the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling out from the night lamp. Inside, Ellie was sleeping peacefully. "As far as it needs to go," he said, "as long as Ellie never has to wonder if she belongs in this family again." The next morning, Nate walked into the police station, carrying a bag full of documents. No one had to push him. No one had to remind him. After last night, everything was crystal clear. If he didn't stand up for his daughter, no one would. Officer Ramirez, on morning duty, greeted him. Nate sat down, straight-backed, and began placing each item on the desk, methodically, without a single wasted word. "I'm here to file charges for abandonment of a minor, with false representation to Child Protective Services, and fabrication of an emergency situation for personal gain." Ramirez took notes, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at how thoroughly, almost coldly, prepared Nate was. "I have screenshots from their social media, exact check-in times matching when my daughter was abandoned. This is the school's confirmation that Ellie's absence wasn't reported. This is a copy of the handwritten note they left at the house, clear as day, arranged temporary care with the orphanage." Nate continued laying out the documents one by one, his voice calm but unshakable. CPS files came next, records showing his parents' initial statement where they claimed they couldn't reach Ellie's parents and were acting as temporary guardians. And this is a statement from the intake worker, Karen, confirming that Ellie was never told her parents were alive. She was dropped off with no documentation, no emergency contact, and incomplete belongings. Ramirez leaned forward, now fully focused. This wasn't just a case file. It was a blueprint of betrayal, meticulously documented, undeniably deliberate. He paused, then placed one final document on the desk, a written account. "And this is what Ellie told me, and her therapist, that her grandparents said I was tired of her, that I needed a break." Every word was a direct hit to a child's trust in her parent. Ramirez let out a slow breath. "Do you have legal representation?" "Yes. Greg Thomas. He's finalizing the court paperwork as we speak. We'll process this. Based on what you've submitted, we can begin a preliminary investigation. If it's confirmed this was a deliberate act causing emotional harm to a minor, it'll be escalated to the DA." Without waiting, Nate headed straight to the county courthouse that afternoon. He filed for an emergency protective order, barring Robert and Donna from contacting or approaching Ellie until the investigation was resolved. Greg had already prepped every document. The court processed the filing faster than Nate expected. That night, Ellie fell asleep early. But around 1 a.m., Nate woke with a jolt. He'd heard something. He rushed to her room. Ellie was tangled in her sheets, body tense, whispering in her sleep. Her lips moved, hands swiping through the air like she was reaching for something just out of reach. Don't leave me." Nate wrapped his arms around her shoulders and gently shook her awake. Ellie's eyes opened, darted around the room, and then she broke into sobs in his arms. "I'm not going anywhere," Nate whispered, over and over. "I'm right here. I'll never leave you." The next morning, he took her to see a child psychologist. After an hour-long session, the doctor came out, her expression quiet and serious. "She's showing clear signs of trauma," she said. "Not just from the recent event, but likely from a prolonged buildup. The sense of being compared, excluded. If we don't intervene, this could leave deep psychological scars." Nate tightened his grip on the backpack strap in his hand. "What did she say?" he asked. "She said, 'I'm not like their real grandkids. Grandma said I don't behave as well as my cousins. She said Mom left because I was hard to raise. And now Dad's tired too.'" Nate didn't answer. He just stood there. For a long, long time. On the drive home, Ellie didn't say much. She just stared out the window, her small hands laced together in her lap. Nate didn't need to ask what was going through her mind. He already knew. The quiet terror that if you're not good enough, the people you love will leave. It's a fear no child should ever carry, let alone have it planted in them like some kind of truth. A few days later, Nate was called in for a meeting with the lead investigator. One of the key things they needed was a witness, and thankfully, one neighbor stepped forward. "The day they left, I saw them loading up suitcases first thing in the morning," said Mrs. Lorna, who lived 3 houses down from Nate's parents. "There was no panic, no sign of stress or urgency. They were even joking. Said, 'Finally, a week to ourselves.' I asked where Ellie was. Mr. Robert just waved it off and said, 'Left her with someone else.'" Nate nodded, another piece of the puzzle falling neatly into place. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, after receiving a formal cooperation request from California authorities, local police dispatched officers to the beachfront resort where Robert and Donna were staying. They were having dinner at the hotel restaurant when two officers approached their table. According to the report that came back, when questioned, Robert remained composed. "We just did what was best for everyone," he said calmly. He, Nate, leaves the girl alone all the time. This time we just wanted one quiet week. Donna deflected most of the questions. When asked why they hadn't informed Ellie's legal guardian, she simply replied, "We assumed he was busy, thought he wouldn't mind." Nate read the report. He wasn't surprised. Because from the beginning, they had never seen Ellie as part of that everyone. She had always been on the outside, not because of anything she did, but because of a bias they never admitted. And now, that bias had consequences. Real ones. Consequences Nate would never allow to happen again. The investigation took over 3 weeks. Robert and Donna weren't arrested, but after their final meeting with Child Protective Services, they were issued a no-contact order with Ellie for an indefinite period. The formal charges were passed to the prosecutor's office. For the first time in his life, Nate saw his parents no longer above it all, no longer untouchable, no longer insulated by that cold, self-righteous certainty that they were always right. The surprise came from Miranda. One evening, Nate's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, hesitated for a beat, then answered. "What the hell are you doing, Nate?" Her voice was sharp. "You're turning our whole family into a circus over something minor, something everyone would have understood if you had just calmed down and talked it through." Nate didn't respond. He listened, the way you listen to static on a broken radio. Miranda went on, "Mom and Dad just needed a break. Ellie's fine, isn't she? Nothing happened that serious, so why blow it out of proportion? Now look, everyone in the family knows. Friends are calling non-stop. Mom's been taking sleeping pills 3 nights in a row." He hung up. No reply. No need. Because in that moment, everything became crystal clear. This was the end of the line. No arguments, no patching things up, no more pretending. None of them had ever really seen Ellie as a child who deserved love. Just an inconvenience, out of sync with the carefully staged ideal family they'd built. After that, Nate kept life simpler. No more family group chats, no more mandatory weekend dinners, just him and Ellie, and a new routine, rebuilt piece by piece, made quiet, safe, and fully theirs. Ellie slowly began to steady. She went back to school. She stopped lowering her head when the teacher called her name. She no longer avoided her classmates' eyes. She started drawing again, bright pictures with huge suns and people holding hands. Nate kept every one, taping them proudly on the fridge. One night, while he was reading her a bedtime story, Ellie suddenly whispered, "Don't worry, Dad. I know you'll always come back for me." Nate froze. His chest tightened, but he just stroked her hair and smiled gently. "Yeah, always." After she fell asleep, he walked to the kitchen and leaned on the sink. The warm light from above cast a soft glow across his face, eyes damp, but mouth still holding that quiet smile. He didn't want her to see the tears. Not because he was ashamed, but because Ellie needed to believe that everything was finally okay. The very next week, Nate submitted a request to change his shift at the company. No more night work, no more 14-hour stretches away from home. He voluntarily moved to a daytime admin role, less pay, but enough to drop Ellie off at school every morning and be there to pick her up every afternoon. The schedule was simple, predictable. But to Nate, it was the biggest win of all. The therapist brought good news. Ellie was recovering better than expected. She has someone who shows up consistently, loves her without question, and makes her feel safe. For a child dealing with trauma, that's the most powerful medicine there is. Nate nodded. No need to say more. He already understood. Sometimes healing your child doesn't take grand gestures, just presence. Right place, right time, long enough. The legal case wasn't over. His lawyer stayed on it. The DA's office was still reviewing charges for intentional abandonment, but Nate wasn't tangled in it anymore. He had made his choice. No more contact. Not with anyone who ever decided Ellie didn't belong. For many people, family is a constant. But for Nate, he learned something else. Sometimes the only family you truly need is the one who stays when the rest of the world walks away. And for him, that person was a 7-year-old girl with brown eyes and a sloth named Sammy. Nate's story didn't begin with some dramatic collapse. It began with small signs. The cool glances, the offhand comments that seemed harmless. Little things stacking up slowly until they formed a hard enough shove to make a 7-year-old wonder if she was a burden. But from that lowest point, Nate stood up, not with rage, but with resolve. With doing the right thing every day in quiet, steady ways no one else might notice, but a child will remember for the rest of her life. Because sometimes the people who bring you into this world won't choose to stay. But real love does. Quiet, steady, unshakable. The way Nate chose his daughter, over and over again, even when others didn't. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between the family you were born into and doing what's right? If this story made you think or stirred something inside you, hit that follow button. Stick with us for more journeys like this one, because maybe one day you'll be the one telling the story that gives someone else the strength to stand.